At the busy checkout counter, the girl's hands trembled slightly as she scanned the items. Yet her voice was steady when she looked up. "Sir, your card has been declined. Do you have another card, or can you pay in cash?" The man hesitated, his face tightening with embarrassment. "I don't have another card, and I don't have any cash right now." Her eyes softened for a moment, but then she glanced toward the store owner standing nearby, watching every move. She lowered her voice. "If it were just me, I would let you go, but he's watching. I can't give this away for free." The man clenched his fists, shame and frustration mixing inside him. He looked around. Customers behind him were staring. The silence felt heavier than the store's bright lights. Finally, he muttered, "Fine. From today onward, I'll never come back to this counter or to this store." He turned and walked out, leaving the groceries behind. The girl tried to remain strong, but inside her heart was pounding. She hated denying people. She hated watching someone leave humiliated. But her job, her survival, depended on following the rules. As the door closed, the owner walked up beside her. His cold voice sliced the air. "Good. That's how you should handle customers. Never let anyone take advantage. Remember, kindness doesn't pay the bills." She forced a smile, but inside her chest burned with guilt. The man who left, she couldn't erase a look in his eyes. Something about him felt different, as if there was more to his story. That night, as she walked home under the dim streetlights, her thoughts wouldn't stop replaying. Who was that man? Why didn't he have money? Was he really just another customer, or was there something more hidden behind his silence? She didn't know that this small encounter at the counter was about to change her life forever. The next morning, the girl walked back into the store with heavy steps. Her shift had just begun, but her mind was still stuck on yesterday's scene. The image of that man, his eyes, his trembling voice, the humiliation he carried as he left, kept echoing in her heart. She tried to shake it off. "It's just one customer," she told herself. "People come and go every day. Why am I still thinking about him?" But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't silence the guilt. The store was buzzing as usual. Customers lined up, scanning items, swiping cards, paying bills. Some smiled, some frowned, some were in a rush, others lost in their own worlds. Yet, for her, every face reminded her of him, the man who had walked out empty-handed. Hours passed. The owner came and went, barking orders, counting cash, glaring at every little mistake. His presence felt like a shadow over her shoulders. She knew she couldn't afford to break the rules again. Not here, not under his eyes. But fate has its own way of repeating stories. That evening, just as she was about to close her counter, the door swung open. And there he was, the same man, the same tired eyes, the same aura of quiet struggle. Her heart skipped a beat. She almost dropped the receipt in her hand. Why? Why did he come back? She thought. He had promised never to return. Yet here he was, walking slowly toward her counter. The other customers whispered. Some recognized him from yesterday. A few even smirked, waiting for another embarrassing scene. He placed only 2 small items on the counter this time, a loaf of bread and a carton of milk. His voice was low, almost apologetic. I hope this time my card works." The girl swallowed hard, her hands trembling as she took the card. For a second, she wanted to let him take the items for free, just push them across the counter and pretend. But the owner's words from yesterday rang in her ears. Kindness doesn't pay the bills. Her stomach twisted in knots as she slid the card into the machine. Seconds felt like hours. The screen blinked, and then, once again, declined. A heavy silence filled the store. The man closed his eyes, as if he had already expected this outcome. His shoulders slumped. He didn't argue this time. He didn't beg. He simply whispered, "It's okay. I understand." He turned to leave, but before he could walk away, something inside her broke. "Wait!" she called out. Her voice was louder than she expected, strong enough to make everyone in the store turn their heads. The man stopped. The girl's hand shook as she looked at him, then at the items on the counter. "Take them," she said softly. I'll handle it." The man froze. His eyes widened, not believing what he had just heard. But You said yesterday. She cut him off. I know what I said. But today, I can't let you leave hungry. The store fell into stunned silence. Even the whispers stopped. Every customer was staring. And then, like a storm breaking, the owner's angry voice erupted from across the aisle. What do you think you're doing? Her blood ran cold. She turned slowly. The owner was marching toward her, his face red with rage. Didn't I tell you yesterday? No free items. Do you think this is a charity? You're stealing from me. Her throat went dry. Fear gripped her chest. Yet, in that moment, she stood her ground. So, she said, her voice trembling but determined, it's just bread and milk. He needed it. I couldn't watch him walk away again. The owner's fist slammed onto the counter, making the register rattle. Customers gasped. You're fired, he roared. Pack up your things and get out of my store. Right now. The girl's heart shattered. She had known this would happen. She had risked everything. But even through her tears, she felt a strange sense of peace. Because for the first time, she had chosen kindness over fear. The man looked at her in disbelief. His lips trembled as if he wanted to speak, but no words came out. All he could do was pick up the bread and milk, his eyes filled with gratitude that went beyond words. As she walked out of the store for the last time, the night air hit her face like freedom and punishment all at once. She had lost a job. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But deep inside, she felt something shift. Because sometimes, one small act of kindness can change the course of two lives forever. The night after she was fired, the girl sat alone in her tiny room. The walls felt closer than ever, pressing down on her. The silence was heavy, broken only by the ticking of an old clock on her desk. Her mind replayed the entire scene again and again. The bread, the milk, the man's eyes, the owner's furious voice. She had stood up for what she felt was right, but now she had nothing. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from her landlord. Rent due tomorrow. No excuses this time. Her chest tightened. She had barely any money left. Losing this job meant losing everything. The rent, the food, her survival. For the first time in a long while, tears slipped down her cheeks. She whispered to herself, did I make a mistake? Should I have just stayed silent? But then, an image came back to her, the man's face when she handed him the bread and milk. Those grateful eyes. That silent thank you. Somehow, that gave her strength. The next day, she wandered the city, searching for a new job. Store to store, cafe to cafe, everyone shook their heads. We're not hiring. Sorry, we need someone with more experience. Come back next month. By evening, her legs ached, and her spirit was breaking. She sat on a park bench, staring at the ground, her stomach growling from hunger. Just then, a familiar voice startled her. Excuse me, are you okay? She looked up. It was him, the same man from the store, the one whose bread and milk had cost her everything. Her heart skipped. She didn't know whether to feel angry, ashamed, or relieved. You, she whispered. He sat beside her, placing a small paper bag in her hands. I thought, maybe you could use this. Inside was a sandwich, still warm. She blinked in surprise. Why are you? He smiled faintly. Because yesterday, you helped me when no one else would. For a moment, they sat in silence, two strangers bound by a moment of kindness. But then, he finally spoke again, his voice low and filled with weight. You must be wondering why I had no money, why my card kept declining, why I looked so lost. She nodded gently. He took a deep breath. I wasn't always like this. I had a family, a good job. People respected me. But life can change in a second. I lost everything. My wife passed away after a long illness. The medical bills drained all my savings. Then, I lost my job. And when you have nothing left, people stop seeing you as human. They look at you like you're invisible. Always like you're a burden. The girl's eyes filled with tears. She had felt invisible too. Maybe not in the same way, but she knew what it was like to be unheard, unseen, unimportant. I thought about giving up so many times, he continued, his voice trembling. But yesterday, when you gave me that bread and milk, It wasn't just food. It was hope. It was a reminder that kindness still exists. Her hands clutched the sandwich tighter. For the first time, she realized her small act had meant more than she could have imagined. The days that followed, they met often. Sometimes at the park, sometimes at a cafe when she could afford tea. Slowly, she began to learn more about him. His name was Daniel. He was once an accountant. He used to wear suits, attend meetings, live in a nice home. Now he was living in a small shelter, trying to rebuild piece by piece. And for her, even in her own struggles, his presence became a strange comfort. Two broken souls finding strength in each other. One evening, Daniel looked at her and said something that changed everything. "You lost your job because of me, and I can't let that go. I may not have much right now, but I promise you, I will find a way to make it right." She tried to laugh it off. "Daniel, you don't owe me anything. I made my choice." But deep inside, she wondered, what did he mean? How could a man who had nothing left possibly change her life? She didn't know yet that Daniel's past held secrets, connections, a hidden truth that would soon come to light. And when it did, her life would never be the same again. The city was quiet that night, but her mind was restless. Sleep wouldn't come. She kept replaying Daniel's words. "I may not have much right now, but I promise you, I will find a way to make it right." What did he mean? He had nothing, no job, no home, no stability. And yet, the way he said it, there was conviction in his voice, as if he carried a hidden strength she couldn't yet see. The next morning, she woke early and went out again, looking for work. The rejection continued. Some shops barely looked at her resume. Others simply shook their heads. By noon, her spirit was drained. She sat on the curb outside a bakery, watching people rush by with bags of food she couldn't afford. Suddenly, a hand reached out. Daniel. This time, he looked different. His hair was combed. His clothes, though worn, were neat, and his posture had changed. There was determination in his eyes. "Come with me," he said softly. She hesitated. "Where?" "Just trust me." Something in his tone told her not to question further. She followed him through narrow streets, past tall buildings, until they reached a small community center. Inside, volunteers bustled about, serving meals, helping families, guiding children. Daniel walked straight to the head volunteer, a middle-aged woman who lit up the moment she saw him. "Daniel," she said warmly, "it's been so long." The girl blinked in surprise. "Daniel, new people here?" Later, sitting at a quiet corner table, Daniel finally explained. "Before I lost everything, I used to come here often. I helped with accounts, organized donations, kept the finances in order. When my wife was ill, they were the only ones who stood by me. But when she passed, I walked away from everything. I couldn't face anyone." His voice cracked, but he continued. "Yesterday, after what you did, I realized I can't keep running from my past. I need to stand again, not just for myself, but for you too." She listened silently, her chest tight with emotion. Days turned into weeks. Together, they began volunteering at the center. Daniel used his old accounting skills to put the finances back in order, while she helped distribute food and comfort families who were struggling just like her. Slowly, life began to feel meaningful again. Not perfect, not easy, but filled with purpose. The bond between them grew stronger. She admired Daniel's resilience. Despite his broken past, he carried wisdom and quiet strength. And Daniel, in turn, admired her courage, the courage to risk everything for a stranger. One evening, as they were leaving the center, Daniel stopped outside, looking at the sky painted with shades of orange and purple. "Do you know why I didn't give up, even after losing everything?" he asked. She shook her head. "Because deep down, I believe that pain has a purpose, that the people who enter our lives, even in the darkest moments, come for a reason. You reminded me of that." Her throat tightened. She didn't know how to respond. But inside, she knew her life was slowly changing in ways she never expected. But fate wasn't done testing them. One afternoon, as Daniel was leaving the center, a black car pulled up. Two men in suits stepped out. They called his name. Daniel froze. His face turned pale. "Who are they?" she whispered. Daniel's silence said it all. His past, the one he hadn't fully shared, was catching up to him. The men handed him an envelope. Inside were documents. She caught a glimpse, legal papers, debts, old company seals. Her heart pounded. "Daniel, what is this?" He finally spoke, his voice heavy. "The truth I've been hiding, the reason I lost everything. And if I don't face it now, it will destroy not only me, but everyone close to me." She stared at him, fear and determination swirling inside her. She had already lost a job because of him. Was she now ready to risk even more? Daniel met her eyes, a silent plea lingering there. The journey they thought was about healing was only leading them into deeper waters. And what lay ahead, neither of them were prepared for. Daniel's hand shook as he held the envelope. His eyes scanned the documents quickly, and every line seemed to drag him deeper into a storm he had been running from for years. The girl sat across from him, her chest tightening as she watched his face grow pale. Finally, he folded the papers slowly and whispered, "It's time I tell you everything." They sat in a quiet cafe, away from the city's noise. Daniel's voice was low, almost trembling, but his eyes carried the weight of years of pain. "Years ago, I wasn't just an accountant. I worked for a large corporation. At first, everything was perfect. I had respect, money, a beautiful home, and most of all, my wife. She was my strength." He paused, staring out the window, lost in memory. But then, corruption started creeping in. Deals under the table. Fake accounts. Money being laundered through the company's books. At first, I tried to ignore it, but eventually I discovered something that shook me to the core. The company wasn't just cheating clients. It was connected to powerful people, people who would do anything to protect their secrets. The girl leaned closer, her heartbeat quickening. "What did you do?" she asked softly. Daniel sighed. "I tried to expose them. I gathered evidence. I thought I was doing the right thing. But before I could act, they found out." His fists clenched. His voice hardened. "They ruined me. They blacklisted me from every firm. No one would hire me. Then they came after my wife. She was already ill, and the stress made her condition worse. By the time I realized how deep their power went, it was too late. She was gone, and I was left with nothing but debts, shame, and enemies watching me from the shadows." Tears glistened in his eyes, though he fought to hold them back. The girl's own eyes welled up. She reached out, placing her hand gently on his. "Daniel, I'm so sorry." He shook his head. "Don't be. I made choices. And now they want me to pay the price." For a long moment, silence sat heavy between them. Finally, she whispered, "But why now? Why are they coming after you again?" Daniel opened the envelope and slid a paper toward her. It was a summons, legal proceedings, claims of stolen funds. His signature forged on fake documents. Her heart sank. "They are framing you." Daniel nodded. "Yes, and if I can't prove my innocence, I'll not only lose what little I have left, I'll lose my freedom too." That night, as the girl lay in her small room, she couldn't sleep. She thought about everything Daniel had revealed. The injustice, the cruelty of powerful men crushing someone who tried to do the right thing. Her mind replayed the moment when she had first met him, standing at her counter, humiliated, powerless. And now she saw the truth. He wasn't weak. He wasn't broken. He was a man who had fought a battle bigger than himself and had been crushed under its weight. And somehow she knew she couldn't walk away now. The next morning, she found Daniel sitting outside the community center, staring at the documents again. "Daniel," she said firmly, "we're not going to let them destroy you. Not this time." He looked up, surprised by the determination in her voice. "What can we do? They have power, money, influence. And I have nothing." She smiled faintly, though her eyes burned with resolve. "You have me, and sometimes that's enough to start." Daniel's throat tightened. For the first time in years, he felt the stirrings of something he thought he had lost forever, hope. But fate had its own plan. That very evening, as they left the center, a black car once again pulled up. This time, the men in suits didn't bring papers. Their expressions were cold, threatening. One of them stepped closer. His voice was like ice. "Daniel, you've been warned before. Drop everything. Or next time, it won't just be about money." The girl froze, fear gripping her. The men's eyes flickered toward her for a moment, and in that instant, she knew she was no longer just a bystander. She was part of Daniel's story now, and that meant she, too, was in danger. As the car drove off, Daniel's face hardened. "It's begun," he whispered. The girl swallowed, her hands trembling. But then, with quiet courage, she said the words that sealed her place beside him. "Then we'll face it together." Daniel looked at her, this young woman who had lost a job, risked her future, and yet stood beside him without hesitation. He nodded slowly, because sometimes the strongest alliances are born not in comfort, but in shared pain. And from that night on, their battle was no longer his alone. The days that followed were a storm. Daniel and the girl, two unlikely allies, found themselves running against time. Every step forward, a new obstacle. Every clue they uncovered, a new threat waiting in the shadows. The men in suits followed them everywhere. Anonymous phone calls warned them to stop. People Daniel once called his friends turned away, afraid to be dragged into his battle. But the girl never left his side. She remembered the trembling cashier she used to be, the girl too afraid to defy her boss. And now, here she was, standing against powerful men, risking everything for someone who was once just a stranger at her counter. One night, they sat at the community center, papers spread out before them, bank statements, fake invoices, old contracts. Daniel's hands were steady now. "They framed me using these accounts," he said. "If we can trace the transactions, if we can show where the money really went, we can prove everything." The girl leaned closer. "Then let's do it. We'll take it to the press, to the court, anywhere someone will listen." Daniel smiled faintly. "You've given me back my fight." The turning point came when they discovered a hidden ledger buried in an old file Daniel had kept by accident. Inside were names, signatures, and proof of every illegal deal the company had made. It was dangerous evidence. Evidence that could bring down men far more powerful than they imagined. The girl stared at the pages, her hands trembling. This could change everything. Daniel nodded, his eyes sharp. "Or it could destroy us both." The final battle wasn't fought in darkness, but in light. They walked into the courthouse, armed with nothing but truth and a pile of fragile papers. The men in suits were there, smirking with confidence, their lawyers dressed in sharp suits. For hours, Daniel spoke, calm, firm, laying out every detail of the corruption he had witnessed. The girl sat behind him, her presence like a silent shield. At first, the room doubted him. They whispered, they scoffed. But then came the ledger, the undeniable proof. And suddenly, the whispers turned into shock. The tide had turned. The judge's gavel fell. Investigations were ordered. The men in suits who once threatened them were now the ones being dragged into custody. For Daniel, it was the first breath of freedom in years. After the trial, outside the courthouse, Daniel stood under the bright sun. The girl walked beside him. "It's over," she whispered. He shook his head gently. "No, it's just beginning. But this time, I'm not alone." She smiled, her heart full. She had lost her job, her security, but she had found something greater. A purpose, a bond, a reminder that kindness, no matter how small, can set off ripples that change lives. Daniel looked at her, gratitude shining in his tired but hopeful eyes. "You saved me. That day at the counter, you thought you gave me bread and milk, but you gave me life." Tears blurred her vision, but she laughed softly. "And you gave me courage, more than I ever thought I had." Months later, they both worked together at the community center, this time not as broken souls, but as builders of hope. Daniel helped families recover from debt, teaching them how to manage what little they had. She organized food drives, making sure no one walked away hungry the way she once had to refuse. And every time they handed bread or milk to a stranger, they remembered the day their stories collided at a simple checkout counter. Two people who had nothing left found everything in each other.